Hello everyone, welcome back to Hard Surface. Today we are going to block out our Nintendo console. When modeling, it's always important to have good reference images. The ones I'm about to show you were downloaded from Google. I'll leave a link in the description so you can download them and use them as you model our Nintendo console. Here we have our measurements: 256mm width, 86 height and 200 length. Let's get back to Blender, head over to the right to the Object tab, come down to Scale and set the X-axis to 2.56. Set the Y to 2 and the Z to 0.86. That's it, we have our size. Next, I'd like to focus on this edge and this tapered shape here. So let's enter edit modes, press Ctrl R, left click and drag it up a little bit, and then do the same below. Ctrl R, left click and drag up. Okay, once that's done, let's click the four corners to select all the verts and hit S and X to scale along the X-axis. Now we are going to insert a few loop cuts to create this edge right here. And maybe even this one. Just create all these shapes. So, to use as a guide, I'm going to create a loop cut right in the middle here. So, Ctrl R, left click and right click to leave it right in the center. Let's create another one, Ctrl R, left click, and you'll notice this one won't stay straight, same as the one in the center. That's because it's adopting the shape of this edge right here. So what we can do is to press E, and then to take the shape of this one here, press F. Now we have a straight line we can pull all the way here and create the shape we need. Insert the next one, Ctrl R, left click and drop it right about there. Insert another one on this side, same process, Ctrl R, left click, press E and make sure it's taking the shape of the one in the center. Let's drag it close to the edge and leave it there. Let's insert one in the middle and left click and right click to leave it in the middle. Let's Ctrl Tab to select edge and then Ctrl B to add the bevel and scale it. Okay, and what we're trying to do here is to create this shape there. Okay, so let's insert another one here. Left click and right click. And there we go. Now we can select faces. Select all the faces here. All the way around up to here. So let's hit E and extrude it in slightly. Not too much. Let's select these faces, bring them back a little bit so it looks consistent with this edge here, and the same down here. You'll notice this one is a bit odd, so let's just pull it like that. Remember to switch to edge, Control tab, and then select edge. We can do the same to this edge, just pull it up, so it's about the same level as this one. Hit Ctrl Tab, select the face, and push it in. Next, we want to cut this shape here. Let's get rid of all that so we can have a better look. Okay, so let's insert another one here. Bring it back this way. Right there. And insert another one here. Ctrl R. Left click and drag it down. And there we have it. All we have to do now is to select these shapes and press E. Extrude them in a little bit like that. Again, we have the same problems as before, so let's just pull them back a little bit. Hit Ctrl Tab, select edge, and select this bottom edge here. Pull it up. Select the top edge here and pull it towards the front so it looks straight. Now we can select the faces and hit Shift D to copy them. Then, without deselecting, hit P and choose Selection. This will separate the selected faces from the rest of the mesh. So, if you exit Edit mode, try to make sure you're only selecting the object we just separated and not the whole console. Let's bring it up. And then we can grab the faces here and bring them out on the y-axis to make sure they are right against the edge there. And bring this down a little bit as well. Perfect. Now, looking at the reference image, I'm trying to get a sense of where everything is and how the sizes relate to each other, where the cuts are, and getting a sense of what we should be doing now and what we should be doing later on. I would say the control ports here fall into the later on category. So this segment is in the right position. This one is fairly good as well. And this bottom one will bring it down. And let's insert another one up here. Ctrl R, bring it up and try to make it the same size as this one. And there we go. Next, we want to create the gaps. So let's select all the edges where the gaps are. Make sure we get the right ones. And then we can hit Ctrl B to bevel and create the gaps. Then hit Ctrl Tab, select faces, hit X and select faces again to delete the faces. Let's just select these two edges and adjust the position on the Z-axis a little bit. Go back to object mode and with the object still selected, hit Shift H to isolate it. Next, let's turn the attention to the panel on the right side. Hit the wrench and we're going to add a Solidify modifier. Now, as you can see, there's some distortion and the size is uneven, so we'll have to look at some options to fix that. First, we'll press Ctrl A and apply scale. often when you have this kind of problem, you can fix it by applying scale, rotation, or rotation and scale at the same time. And it will usually get rid of those issues for you. So now, to make sure the thickness is even, we're going to the side panel here on the right, and we're going to check even thickness, which, as you can see, makes our mesh very even. Let's increase our thickness a little bit, have a look around, make sure it's what we want. Press Alt-H to unhide everything. And we'll keep adjusting our thickness until we make sure we can match the size of this edge over here. I think it's looking good for the moment. Let's just press Tab and then Control Tab, select Faces, then press A to select all, then press S followed by X to resize on the X-axis. So let's have a look around. I think it's looking pretty good with the exception of this top bit over here. The top looks a bit too big, so let's just select the edges. We are then going to convert this selection from edges to vertices by holding Ctrl and selecting vertex. Not that we have to make this conversion, but I just thought I'd let you know how. So we scale it in and match the size a bit better. Press Tab to exit edit mode and let's select the door and adjust the gap here as well by selecting the vertex and bring it over to the right. Then we'll select the edges on top, and to select the whole loop, hold Alt and click on an edge, and to select two loops, hold Alt and Shift and click on both edges. Delete them by pressing Ctrl and X. Let's grab this top edge and pull it back a little bit. And I'll pull this one up as well to increase the size of the gap here. Same on the left side. And let's adjust the back a bit more. Let's right click to bring the cursor over. Then we'll use Shift A to bring in a cube. Hit S to scale it down. And then push it back into position. I'm pretty happy with the placement now, so let's scale it. Let's hit S and Z to scale it on the Z, bring it up a bit, scale it again on the X-axis. And now I'm going to the top view to make sure we're doing this correctly, so numpad 7 and numpad 5 for orthographic. Let's also go into wireframe mode by pressing Z and adjust our size as well as our placement. When you are scaling, moving or rotating objects, you can always hold Shift to make your changes more precise. We can now press Z to exit wireframe mode, press 5 on the numpad to return to perspective view. Now we are ready to add to this object an array modifier, which works like any other modifier. We have to go to the panel on the right side of the screen, locate it under our object modifiers, which is this range here. So use the drop down menu to select array. Now as you can see, it's doing nothing special, just creating an instance of our object to the left, and that's not what we want. So let's go to the panel and let's change a few settings. Let's change the X to 0. So let's put 1.5 on the Y-axis, and that's not what we want either. So to change direction, let's put instead negative 1.5. So now we'll try to figure out how many we need to give us the look we want, and that's going to be defined by the line we created earlier on back here. So let's select our object and let's use 27 as our starting point. And that's one too many, so we can always change it to 26 and maybe readjust it later on. And it looks satisfying to me. We'll see how it looks once we start adding more pieces to the console. Next, we are going to create this shape here in the back. And to do that, we'll mirror the front one and we'll delete the bottom half. So I know the origin is in the right place. So let's just go to modifiers and add mirror. And let's mirror not on the x-axis, but on the y-axis. As you can see, it's correctly placed. So we can just apply it and enter edit mode. Then select faces and delete the bottom half. Now, as an exercise, I'd like you to pause the video and go to the door in the front here and try to remember how we added a solidify modifier and do the same for the door. In case you don't remember, just go back and watch it again. I'm not going to do everything in this video because it would take forever and this video would end up being 10 hours and I don't think anyone wants to sit through 10 hours of me rambling. So if you have any doubts, please leave a question in the comments and I'll get back to you rather quickly. So next we are going to start modeling our bottom half. So let's have a look at our references and see what's happening. So on the bottom we have these strange indentations going all the way to the sides and one to the back. So let's enter edit mode and let's start working on it. Hit Z to enter wireframe and B to marquee select the bottom half. Once selected, we're going to press P and selection to detach by selection. Then we can press Z again to return to our shaded view. And we can hit Shift H to hide everything else. And then select edge and Alt click on the edge to select the edge loop all the way around. Then we can press E to extrude it and scale it in. Then press E again and move it up on the Z axis. That looks okay, but let's just fix some small mistakes in our extrusion. We'll pull those faces back and make sure the margins are similar all the way around. Then we change to edges and select this edge, pull it back a little bit on the y-axis, and let's have another look at our reference to make sure we're doing everything right. So we want to place our line not at the edges but in the middle, because we're about to use bevel to create two edges out of it. So we'll go back to our model and we'll select the edge in the middle, move it to the left, then we'll create a few more edges here, and these will be to shape the rectangle in the middle. And two more. That's the last one. And now we'll select the edges we created before and hit Ctrl B to bevel. Just try to match the size roughly. We can always adjust it later on if it's not right. I don't think the size of the rectangle is quite right, so let's adjust it. And it's always a good idea to keep looking at the reference back and forth. Even if I'm sometimes not looking at it, you should look at yours. Now we can add a loop cut and bring it down. select faces and select the faces on the ends of our indentations, or soon to be indentations anyway. Now we can select this whole row of faces by holding Control, selecting the first, and then Control and selecting the last, and then holding Shift and selecting the rectangle, and then hit E and extrude it along the Z-axis, and you'll notice we created some faces on the ends, and we'll have to delete those as well. Those were unintentionally created by our extrusion. But first, let's make sure we match the height of this line here with our extrusion. And then we can move on to delete the faces. Once our faces are gone, we'll have to merge the vertexes. So let's select vertex. And as you can see, this is loose and we'll need to merge it. To make sure we select both, let's enter wireframe and use a marquee selection. And then hit Ctrl V and select merge at center. Let's do the same for the other ones, but this time we'll select this one first and then this one and Ctrl V, merge at last. So we move the position of the first one to the last one, and that way we won't cause any distortions in our mesh. Same again here, and the same again for the other side. Always remember, if I'm going a bit too fast, or if I fail to mention any keys I'm pressing, you can always refer to the top right corner of the screen, which is displaying all of my key presses. So let's have a look at the bottom and bring our cursor over by right-clicking in the center here. And we'll bring in a cube, Shift A and select cube. Then we'll resize this cube, make it fit in there, and adjust the shape so it becomes more of a rectangle. Select the faces and shape it into position. Let's try to match the bottom of our console. Let's bring the top face down and delete it, pressing X and face. Now let's match our shape in the X-axis. And I think the bottom is sticking out a bit. So let's pull it up on the Z. Next, we're going to learn about Booleans, and we're going to create this shape in the back here, and another one on the side as well, this one. And then we'll create the holes to fit in the connectors. So a Boolean is a modifier, but the way I like to use Booleans is by keeping them visible and accessible on the left side. But to do that, we'll have to go to File, Preferences, and here in the search, type bool. Click the box to check it on the Object Bool tool, and you should see the tool appear on the left hand side. Let's now hit Alt-H to unhide everything. Looking at the reference, we can see that the way to make this shape is to bring in a cube and to cut it in using the Boolean tool. We'll keep looking at our reference and trying to shape the cube to match the size. Once we are fairly happy with the size, let's return to object mode and let's shift select our mesh, then head over to the sides and under brush tools use difference. As you can see, this cuts our shape into the mesh, and we can move the cube around to change the shape. Now, because it's too deep, we are going to select the cube and we are going to move it back so it matches our reference. For our indentation on the side, we are going to do the same thing again. We'll bring in a cube and we'll cut the shape into the mesh. Let's resize it, bring it into position, and let's have a look at our reference to see what we're doing. And as you can see, you can use other bits of the mesh to kind of get a sense for its size. And make sure we place it into position there. There's actually a line that goes across there, so we have to try and recreate that shape by pulling it down slightly. And we have to be mindful of the distances between the bottom half of the cube and the bottom of our console, as well as the spacing for that screw there. Let's pull it over a bit more, as it was too short. And I think we're ready to cut, so select the cube and then shift select the mesh, use difference under brushes, and then we have our shape cut in. Now all we have to do is to try and match the shape on the console, and I think we need to bring it out once more and kind of form a triangle there. I think we are ready to apply the brushes. So let's hit apply brush. And we can now delete them. Actually, we have to hit apply on both of them. So hit apply on the one in the back and then select both and delete them. So this will leave us with two overlapping edges. So let's go into vertex mode, marquee select the vertex and press merge at first, and the same on this side. And you can do at first as well. Let's look at our reference, and the next step is to create the vents. So let's make sure we have the right spacing, and let's try to reuse some of our geometry we had already created. So looking at it, we have to create a line here. Control R, loop cut, and then we can bring this line back a little bit to create some width. And actually I think it's probably best if we select both at the same time so we have the same size, and deselect those and then move them back on the y-axis. Try to match the size roughly. We're not getting any medals for precision engineering, so let's just make some small adjustments and keep adjusting as we go. This is the blockout stage after all. So now let's add a cut here. First, we'll create a small margin here. Then we'll use Ctrl R, loop cut, then scroll to create more lines, and let's make sure we have 8 before we apply it. Then click, and we have our faces. So let's select them, and once they're all selected, do the same on the other side. And with both sides selected, we're going to do an extrusion, pressing E and extrude up. Let's select these faces, and once selected, we'll push them in a little bit. Do the same on the other side. Push them in. And I think they're looking a bit small. They need to be longer. But let's have a look at our reference to confirm. And I think they could stand to be a bit longer. So let's go into wireframe and orthographic view of the bottom. Let's select our vertex, use the marquee, and bring them back on the X. I'm just making sure I selected the right ones. Do the same for the other side. Oops, not those. Those. And bring them back again on the X. And readjust everything. Everything's up for grabs at this point, so mess with it as much as you like. Yours doesn't have to look like mine. The more time you spend on it, the better. And now let's have a look at the reference, and there's another vent to create here. It comes to the sides and under those inputs there. So let's make this a bit bigger again, a lot bigger, and let's create some lines here so we can start fixing our topology a little bit. Here you can use the knife tool by pressing K to make a few cuts into our geometry, and then you click on one vertex and then the other, and it makes a line. Once the line is made, just press enter. The knife tool is a bit fiddly, so be careful. To create our vents, let's insert a loop cut here and place it in the middle, so left click out of it and use the bevel tool. Get the size to match the reference and adjust your topology a bit here so we can create a straight line. To do that, there's a trick you can do, which is to scale on the x-axis. Scale it in a couple of times and it will become straight. And there we go, a straight line. Now you have to pull it back, roughly match the size of the other vent. We can now insert an edge loop and use scroll to create more lines. Make sure you created 7 new lines. Then select every other face. And once again, we're going to extrude them in. Now to me this is looking a bit big, so I'm going to select the vertices, use the marquee to select them, make sure everything is selected, and then we can scale along the y-axis and have a little bit more proportional size in relation to the other vents. So now I think it's a good time to add the power and reset buttons as well as the lights. So to do that, let's head over to the left side, bring over the cursor and Shift A to bring in a cube, resize it, go into edit mode to shape it, and make sure you are matching the lines on the console properly, so it should match the division there, and try to scale it and match the size on the pictures. You should always check the references, don't be like me, I'm not very wise. Now we can delete the face and push this one back. Try to get our shape right. Let's insert a loop cut in the middle and create a margin on the left. Let's insert another one. Bring it down and bevel it. Then divide this in two with another loop cut and do the same again here, and now we have 4 equal spaces. Let's grab the loop cuts and let's bevel them again. Now we can grab these faces and pull them out a bit. Okay. Grab those faces and we're going to extrude them in. Of course, you'll notice we have the face from our console blocking us, but we'll get that sorted in a minute. Let's create 2 more loop cuts here and select both of them, then bevel, and this creates a perfect square there. Let's extrude it in as well, pull it back and give it some depth. Now we can take care of this face and make sure we have a hole that allows us to see the other mesh. So we'll pull this one to the left and this one to the right. And then we can start matching things a bit, making our topology a bit better. Then select the faces and delete them. So now we can see the holes for our buttons. And it's time to start creating the buttons themselves. There's many ways to do this, but I'm just going to select these faces and I'm going to inset them. So to inset something, press I and then scale it in, and then press C to extrude them out and adjust the size. Remember to keep looking at the reference, don't be like me. Now this one is looking weird, so we're going to make it a bit bigger to match the size of our shape a bit better. Bring it back, and the back as well. Grab those verts and push it out. There's our buttons. Since we're about to work on smaller details, what I would advise you to do is to press N, come to the view, and under clip size, set it to 0.001. This will make it so when you get close to the mesh, it won't clip, so you'll be able to see a lot more. So when I head back to the controller and change the value, you'll see it starts clipping and you won't be able to see it. So keep it as low as you can, at least when you're working on details. I think it's a good idea to start adjusting this gap here, so let's select edge and alt click to select all the way around. Bring it up a little bit. Next, let's select the door, and if you still have a solidify modifier on it, click apply on the right side, and it should make it part of your mesh. Then add a loop cut in the middle. Use the bevel to make two parallel lines. Then insert another loop cut, bring it down, and split it in two with the loop cut in the middle. Come to the left and set the origin to geometry. Then we can select all the faces on the left side and delete them. Once the faces have been deleted, we can apply a mirror modifier and mirror along the x-axis. And now we can extrude this out and make sure we delete the faces we don't need. And insert a loop cut there. Bring it back slightly. Bring this down. And then we can hit K and cut a bit here. Press enter. And then insert a loop cut there. And then connect it with cuts with the knife tool. Okay, so let's grab this edge and let's bring it in to create this shape. And let's bring this down a bit. It's too much. And back. Make it a bit smaller. Actually, it might not be too much. Let's bring it out again. And up slightly. Insert another loop cut there. And bring this line out like so. I think that's okay. Now on the top, let's add another loop cut. I'm going to hit E to straighten it up. And I'm going to select this face, hit I to inset. And scale it. Then I'll hit E and extrude it out and delete the end. Let's bring this down a bit more. Yep. Now we'll handle the controller ports. So let's select this bit and select this face. And let's hit P and selection to separate it. I'm going to remove the Solidify modifier by pressing X here. And I'm also going to say origin to geometry and move it back. Like so. We'll also need to create a hole. So let's select the bottom half, and first let's line up this line with this one, and we can either eyeball it or you can use the snaps by pressing snaps here and make sure it's on vertex. Then you can use the z-axis to bring it down to that level. You can then shift tab out of it. Right. Let's have a look and see which lines correspond to what. I'm going to press 1, 5 and Z. Those were on the numpad, by the way. I'm going to select these faces on the bottom half, and I'm going to create a couple of edges here. And bring them out like so. Remember, I'm using E to match the shape. Now we can select the faces and extrude them back. Now we can select the object and push it back as well. Then enter object mode, insert another loop cut, select the faces or the face and extrude it out. We'll just have a quick peek at our reference and check out the ports. And we'll start by modeling the frame around it. Let's insert an edge loop here. And another, making a cross, same as before. Then bevel it out. Then let's push those into position by scaling them out on the X. Make sure you have snaps off, otherwise that happened. And I think that's a bit too much, so let's bring them in again a little bit. Same for the horizontal ones. On the z-axis, make sure you lock that down. Create another line in the middle, bevel it. Let's then select both faces and check the reference. Extrude them in a little bit and then inset them. And extrude them in again. Extruding is probably the most used word in 3D modeling. Alright, so far so good. Now we can inset those as well. With the faces still selected, press I to inset. And then extrude them out. And try to match the reference best you can. Next, hit Ctrl+ to expand the selection. Followed by P to separate the selection. Also, we want to separate the bottom half from the extrusion on top, so enter edit mode use the marquee to select everything. Make sure it's all selected in wireframe and hit P to separate by selection. Next, we have a look at our reference, and as we can see here, the corners are rounded, so we're going to select the segments, and let's have a better look. Select the segments all the way around, and we're going to bevel them and try to match the shape on our reference. Actually, before we continue, let's put a line in the middle there so we can mirror later. Then we can select the segments all the way around. Once selected, we can hit Ctrl B to bevel and push them out, then use the scroll to increase the number of lines, and I'll have a total of 5. We can then do the same on the inside and bevel it. Add 5 lines, same as before, but make this a bit bigger. Let's press a couple of times to select everything. Then let's hit Ctrl V and remove doubles. Enter wireframe so you can see the back. Select these edges and hit F to create a face. Now we can do the same on the inside. But actually, instead of selecting all the edges around, let's just select the bottom ones. Let's bevel, make it nice and round, and check the reference, make sure you're on the right track. Then select the edge on the top and bring it down. Let's bevel this one and add some segments to it. Bring it up, try to fill in the gaps, and do the same here. Keep checking the reference. This shape is a bit trickier, and we made a bit of a mistake here, so to correct it, let's go to our front view and press numpad 5 for orthographic. Bring this down. Adjust the vertices. Let's pull out the rocket launcher and silence the cop car. Let's keep adjusting the vertices and use marquee selection to select them, so you can make sure you select the ones at the back as well. So we have 7 holes here, 4 on the left and 3 on the right. Once we place them on our mesh, they'll help us have a better understanding of the proportions. So let's bring the cursor over, right click on the mesh and Shift A, bring in the cylinder, go to the left side and set the vertices to 12, and then scale our cylinder down. Press N and let's turn it 90 degrees on the Y. On the X. Switch to a front orthographic view and move it into position. Hit Shift D to duplicate. So my cylinder is too big, that's what she said. So we're going to resize it and duplicate it again. Let's then duplicate both of them and bring them up 2 times. And then grab just one and duplicate that one, bring it up. Now our cylinders aren't matching our shape very well, and this is to be expected. So we're going to try and reposition them a little bit, and then we'll just scale them up to match the reference a bit better. Once scaled up, we'll adjust the position and we'll start working on our mesh behind them. Scale it a bit as well, setting the origin to the center of the mesh, and then we'll shape the edges all around and make it match the reference as close as we can. I'm not going to spend too much time here, just demonstrate how it's done, and then I'll work on it a bit more off screen. So let's merge our cylinders. Shift select all of them, Control J, and once merged we're going to select the cylinders and then shift select the mesh and use a difference Boolean. I don't think the holes are deep enough as they are, so let's scale a little bit. But before we scale, let's make sure to select only the representation of the cylinders and scale that, push it in a little bit to give us the depth we want. I think this looks pretty good. So let's now create the fit. Bring the cursor over, Shift I, select the cylinder and scale it down until it roughly matches the size. Adjust the position a little bit, keep scaling. Let's bring it down a little bit. Scale it out a bit more. Let's look at our reference. And as we can see, the size is pretty spot on. So let's start working on our shapes. Delete the top face before we forget. Let's inset the bottom face and then extrude it out. Okay, this looks a bit too tall. So let's grab the edge loop on top, bring it down, and bring the whole mesh up. It looks alright. So now let's copy it. Make sure you get the position right. Then copy both of them to the other side. And finally we can merge them by hitting Ctrl J. And we can set the origin to geometry. With that done, we can turn our attention to the back of the console. And we are going to use the Boolean tool to create the shapes here. This looks like a bit of a tapered shape. And then we have a roundish one, but with a square top. The square shapes can easily be made with edge loops. So let's do a loop cut here. And as you can see, we have a few overlapping lines on there. To get rid of them, I'm going to select all the vertices, hit Ctrl V and remove doubles. Now we can add a line and it will end there as it should. And pay attention to the distances here. Let's try to match them as well as we can. Bring the lines over and make sure you don't have snaps enabled so it doesn't freak out on you. Bring another line there and keep trying to roughly match the distances. I'm not sure if there's a margin there or not, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just assume it isn't there. I'll then use the bevel. Scale it out. Make sure you're not messing up any other important bits. Keep checking the reference and keep shaping things. I'm trying to reproduce the taper. Next, we are going to bring in a cylinder so we can cut in our shape. Let's scale it down. And switching to the back view or to orthographic. Let's turn it 90 degrees on the X. Let's press K to bring in the knife and cut an edge in there. Same at the back. And then we are going to select the faces on the top half and we're going to delete them. Select the edge loop around and extrude it up. Let's bring it into position and scale it. I think I should bring the rounded part down a little bit, so I'm grabbing the vertices and I'm pulling it down on the z-axis. Now let's select both edges and hit F to create a face. Apply the scale. Then we can select our newly created shape and shift select the mesh. Come over to our tools and use the Boolean difference. Once you're happy, hit apply and we can then delete it. Now we're going to extrude some faces in to create the holes. But before that, I'm going to correct them a little bit. Move them around, try to match the reference. It's a lot easier now that we have all the shapes in here. I'm going to select the two faces at the back and hit Ctrl+ to grow my selection. Bring it over to the left. Then I'm going to fix the topology a little bit. I'll create two loops there. Then we are going to select the vertex and merge them. Do the same for the other side. Once that's done, we can finally extrude those faces in. Then I have another cool exercise for you. You should be able now to create the holes on the other sides. It's exactly the same we've done here at the back. I won't be recording it, but if you have any doubts, as always, you're very welcome, and in fact I encourage you to ask me in the comments. I'm going to clean up the topology a little bit, so I'll use the knife tool. It will probably be the most used tool when you're fixing topology. You delete some lines, you add some lines. Remember to try and make quads wherever you can, but if you're fixing a flat surface, that's not going to be animated. It's not essential that you have quads. You can have some triangles, but you need to be careful with them, and you need to know where to put them, because when you're smoothing things, some otherwise flat surfaces will become curved and you might run into some shading issues. Some of these lines are going to end at the bottom. I'm not going to connect them yet. And the reason for that is we're going to add a lot more geometry, and I think I'll have a better sense of what to do with them later on. Next, we're going to model these bits here. So let's try to get a better view. This image is a bit low res, but it gives us a good enough sense of what we have to do, with the exception of the one in the middle, which I can't make out. So let's place our cursor there, bring in a cylinder, scale it down, and let's turn it 90 degrees on the x-axis, keep scaling it. Once it's in position, let's bring it out, and let's look at our reference, and we'll start to shape the edges. We'll delete the face at the back first, and then select the edge. Use the bevel, and use the scroll to create some more lines, and round off the edges. Let's select this face and inset it. Once insetted, let's extrude it in. And inset in again. Let's try to match the shape. And let's inset once more and pull it in, or push it in rather. Keep extruding until you have the hole you want, and delete it and put it back into its place. Let's look at our reference again and see what the power input looks like. And let's bring in a cube, scale it down, and shape it into more of a rectangle. Make sure we are matching the reference and we get the size right. It's looking okay to me. So now let's bring this back again a little bit, all of it. And once we are happy, we'll just delete the faces. Let's bring in a cylinder, scale it down, and the idea is to use the Boolean to create a hole. I think the size is good, so let's just use the Boolean, use difference, and there's the hole. Let's make it a bit deeper, and apply and delete. Let's select the face at the back, and we are going to duplicate it and then detach it. Let's now select it and resize it, extrude it out to create that metal bit in the center, and make sure it's what we want. I think it's looking okay. Now, to give you a bit of a sense that the console is not just an empty shell, if you happen to look through the hole, let's just bring in a cube, and we are going to place it inside. Let's scale it and shape it into position. And later on, if you want, you can add some textures to the inside of this cube, and it will look like you actually have electronics inside. Personally, I think that's a bit overkill. I'm not going to do it, but it's up to you. I'm happy with just having a sense of an object inside. You can do the same for every hole in the console. So that's another good exercise for you. So now let's create the screw holes. Let's bring in the cylinder, scale it, and move into position. Check the reference to make sure we are cutting in the right amount. As you can see, some cut in more than others, and we are going to try to recreate that so it doesn't look weird. Okay, this one cuts in quite a bit. So let's make sure it's doing that. And because of the taper, you'll see as it cuts in more, you'll have less height on the sides. So let's make sure we really push it in. This one doesn't cut in as much, so we'll pull it out. And we have to be careful with the top to make sure everything is cutting in. But for now, let's just copy and do the same on the other side. This is one of those that cuts in really well. And actually, I think I'll copy the other one instead. Delete that, copy this one, so they line up well. Make sure you're cutting in the right amount and all of the mesh is intersecting. Let's then copy to create the center ones. I think our cylinders are a little bit small, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, I think it's looking alright. But let's have a look at the bottom. Yeah, we're a bit small, but let's not worry too much about it. Let's select all the cylinders. And then, once selected, we can hit Ctrl J. As you can see, this one is not fully intersecting. So let's bring it up a bit, make sure it's right in there. And all the others are as well. And then let's do a difference Boolean again. It's our favorite tool. Alright, everything looks good. We don't see any weird issues. We should always be very careful with booleans, as they can create some bad issues and especially mess up the topology, as they always do. But to be honest, the booleans have come a long way. They used to be a lot worse. We are ready to apply and delete. Now the last thing I want to do is to create a small screw. So let's bring in a sphere. And before we move it, let's set the segments to 16. Because once you move it, it's gone. Alright, so let's enter edit mode and select all of the bottom faces. Delete them. Scale it on Z. And select the edge loop at the bottom. Extrude it down. Extrude it in and extrude it down again. Extrude once more, bring it down, and hit F to create a face. Now take a wild guess as to what tool we're going to use. That's right, a Boolean. We're going to bring in a cube, scale it down, bring it up, and scale it down some more. Then we're going to enter edit mode, select the 4 faces around. One quick way to do this is Alt Control and click on an edge. It selects all the faces around. Then go to Tools and Extrude Individual. Extrude them out. Come to the bottom and make sure you have individual origin. Scale it in. Bring the whole mesh down. And make sure nothing is showing from the screw. Shift select the screw and Boolean difference. You can then apply, and we can check out our mesh, see what the topology is like. And of course we have some problems we need to fix. It's not that important actually, you could leave it as it is. But I'll just show you how to fix one side and then you can fix the other ones. So Ctrl R, create a loop cut and then use the knife to connect it. Let's merge these two verts here. Merge at center. Same for the other side. Then we'll insert another loop cut. And use the knife to connect it again. And do the same again. connect using the knife, and that's it. So now I'm going to leave it up to you to place the screw in its place and to add any other details you might want. I'll have a link in the description so you can download my mesh in case you have any doubts or you just want to look at how I've done it. In the next chapter we'll be preparing the mesh to do subdivisions, and we'll have our mesh looking nice and smooth with realistic corners instead of square 90-degree angle lines. We'll also go over the texturing and finally rendering. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I very much hope to see you again in part 2. Please, if you enjoyed it and if it was useful, leave me a thumbs up and a comment saying how good or bad this video was. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.